Yes, here's a question that I've been wanting to. I almost answered on Twitter, but I got distracted by something else. So this question is about perform. I often talk about performance budget when we talk about optimization, and we specifically often talk about when we talk about lights and stuff. And so the question is like, what does performance budget mean really? So performance budget is like a loose term, but the generally the way you see it is like performance budget is when you're rendering a frame, right? You're often shooting for a target frame rate. You have a target frame rate and you have a minimum viable frame rate, where like we're shooting for 60 FPS. I think that's like our goal, and that's kind of reasonable. But we also have a minimum viable frame rate, which is like what's the lowest frame rate you can play the game and it's still okay, and that minimum viable frame rate differs based on like what kind of game it is. So like if you're playing a music rhythm game, for instance, then your minimum viable frame rate might be 60 FPS. Like you have to have at least 60 FPS and stuff like that. Blah blah blah. Anyway, so the performance budget that I keep mentioning is, we often say, okay, so if our target frame rate is 60 FPS, that means that each frame is rendered in 16 milliseconds, right? So that means if all the aspects that are in the game that does any kind of logic stuff and like updates, that runs on the CPU or GPU, whatever, that needs to run with under that that target time, right? So often when we talk about the budget, we mean like, okay, if we have 16 milliseconds to be able to perform everything we need to perform each tick, each update frame kind of. So like if it takes 1 millisecond to run like the logic for your factory, if it takes 1 millisecond to update like all the enemies in the game and stuff like that, if it takes 4 milliseconds to do something else, blah blah blah, like all that stuff adds up. And that's what determines what frame rate you get. And if we have, when we measure stuff, we measure it on low spec hardware kind of. And so for instance, if we have like systems where like if rendering takes 8 milliseconds right now in the game, then we can't and like that means that we bloat the budget. That means we can't reasonably add anything that's going to add like another millisecond, because we're still exceeding our performance budget, right? So that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about like stuff like that. So we'll probably talk about this a bit with Gafka, maybe about light specifically, because he knows more about that than I do. But it's the same thing there. Like if we add lights, then okay, we need to have room for that kind of in the budget, which means, okay, if we're gonna add lights, we have to shrink down like the way you use it to have like the general use case of that to be as few milliseconds as possible. And then we also need to be able to afford somewhere else in our budget to like get something out in the budget and to be able to fit it in, in the schedule kind of. So long story short, it's just like all these different things in the game that is taking up CPU time and taking up rendering time. Like if we're gonna add lights, we need to be able to fit that in that budget. And this is something we talk about game development in general, like how some games can have like really accurate simulation going on, whereas in other games it's just like we don't have physics in Satisfactory, for instance, and that is because that's such a big part of the budget. But if we remove physics, then we have room for other things that we can do, like all the rendering stuff and logic. So yes, very very long question or answer, but yeah. I just read like Drawing Chaos' Snoot Buddy. I was like, dude, are you okay? Do you want to sit down? Like, yeah, like multi-threaded stuff is one thing that we when we added more support for that means that, we cleared up some space in the budget so we can add this thing, and that's what we used to add pipes. So like when we added the multi-threading stuff that's currently in the game, we got this big hole in the budget, and we're like, all right, let's cram pipes in that shit. So it's a balancing act of figuring out what you can and can't afford to run in your game. And Satisfactory, unfortunately, is one of those games where it scales. So like you can have like a shit ton of stuff in the game, and that will affect CPU time. So yes.